We love shooting, hunting, and educating. So if you want to learn about long-range shooting, you're in the right place. This is the Long Range Addicts Podcast. Shooter ready, stand by.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Long Range Addicts Podcast. Appreciate y'all tuning in on this nice Wednesday evening. Hopefully you had a great weekend. I apologize for not having the podcast last week. We're trying to get all set up for Dog Valley Precision, getting our butts kicked, trying to make sure that it's a good match. And we're going to be seeing Timney there pretty soon too. So that'll be nice to see the trailer back. We saw it the first year and we haven't seen it since. Everybody's kind of been moving around, but that'll be exciting. Anyway, first off, I want to thank again Benchmark Barrels for sponsoring the show. They're running a special through the end of the month, so you've got a couple days. If you buy a barrel, you're going to get a free hat or a free t-shirt. So make sure you go check out Benchmark. I just got my new 6 GT barrel in. Excited to build another gun that I probably won't freaking shoot. So again, here we go. Anyway, Jonathan's joining us. How you doing tonight, Jonathan?
Doing pretty good. Just trying to stay not bored during quarantine.
Are you on quarantine?
Nah, just not able to do shit because nothing's open.
Well, just go do stuff on your own, I guess. And Jill and Daniel from Timney, how you guys doing?
Good.
Great.
Good.
Let us come on.
Not a problem. I've been shooting the hit a lot lately, and there's been some people asking me about it. And I'm like, why the heck don't we just bring those guys on, talk about the hit, talk about Timney, talk about some of the good stuff that is going on down there. Anyway, Jill, can you introduce yourself?
I can. My name is Jill Lockwood. I started at Timney almost a year and a half ago, and it has been quite the adventure since I started here. I've had the opportunity to watch this company grow quite a bit just in this last year and a half, and it's been an amazing ride so far.
Yeah, it's a great company. You got John DeVere, if anybody knows John, great guy, DeVere family. Chris Ellis, PR and marketing, freaking great guy as well. There's a great team down there. Now, for any of you that don't know Daniel, can you introduce yourself, Daniel?
Yes, my name is Daniel Horner. Currently, I'm a professional shooter for Timney Triggers and 6 Hour and Tier Tactical. So a little bit about my history. I grew up shooting competitively, but also spent 13 years in the Army's shooting team. So did a lot of shooting there, long-range competitions, 3-in competitions, things like that. Got out about a year and a half ago and got lucky enough to get in with some great companies. So,
yeah, it's nice to be blessed every once in a while, isn't it?
Doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Then your wife shoots a lot of long range, doesn't she?
Oh yeah, for a little while she was ranked as the #1 PRS lady, and then right at the end of the season, she ended up finishing in the #2 spot. So she's a phenomenal long-range rifle shooter. So that was actually one of the first match that we shot together once we were married was the Mammoth Sniper Challenge, and we ended up winning that. So she's pretty tough.
Yeah. That's pretty good. Are you going to start shooting a lot more long range? Or are you going to stick to the 3-gun side of things?
It'll depend on what's best for the companies. So with the Cross coming out from SIG, I'll probably start doing some PRS, probably starting next year because this whole virus thing kind of screwed up all the competitions. But I'll still continue. I've got multi-gun nationals coming up in like 2.5 weeks, so getting ready for that.
Yeah, and then you came out with a new. Now the AR side used to be one of my big things, and there are in some of the forums I've been reading, there are a lot of guys starting to build ARs for some of I would say like the 2-gun stuff, like competition dynamics, where you've got a dedicated AR and then you've got a dedicated long gun type thing. Now, you just came out and designed a new trigger with Timney. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and maybe why some of these guys that would get into this would want to run that trigger?
Sure. We got one right here. So this is the Dh3 Trigger from Timney. When I got out, first thing was I was working with SIG, and SIG said, "Hey, we need a really good AR trigger. We need to upgrade the trigger systems. Go figure that out." I said, "Okay, no problem." I said, "Is there anybody that you want me to start with?" And I was, obviously hoping that they would lean toward Timney because they've got the best name. And they said, "Yeah, go down there and work with Calvin and see if we can put something together on that front." I'm like, "Okay, perfect." So flew down here and we started designing the trigger. And the way that most AR triggers are designed, obviously they work because they've been functioning for many, many, many years. But if you think about the amount of force that's applied to the hammer-sear relationship and where it's located, it's not the most advantageous. And so what we wanted to do was, go with what has worked, for other companies, but kind of make some tweaks and move the hammer-sear relationship back here. And the goal was to basically get to a really good bolt gun feel, no creep, real lightweight, and make it more for the enthusiast / competitor, but also something that's extremely reliable. So we're not always having to clean it or it's breaking. So if you can look in here, I'll do my best to show the camera. All these parts in here are very sizable, big pieces. We're not running on little tiny springs or little small pieces that could break. And we've also got a ton of mechanical advantage over the spring by moving this sear engagement point to the back of the hammer instead of trying to put it down here at the base of the hammer like a normal conventional design. Another thing about it is there's no movement in the trigger itself, which has been something that's kind of been it was a frustration of mine over the years. Is you had a ton of slop in the trigger on AR-15s, and it was just kind of accepted for the longest time. So we were able to eliminate that by holding a little bit tighter tolerances and also tensioning the trigger, the cassette that the trigger's in, to the actual lower. So these pins basically will fall in and out until you set screw the trigger in there. The trigger cassette is pushing up against these two pins. So there's no need for anti-walk pins or anything like that. And there's no way that your trigger is going to have any issues that we used to see where you'd be Loctite screws or something like that. So this trigger is adjustable from 1.5 pounds up to 4 pounds. Mine's set a little bit lighter, but it's a really, really good trigger. I think everybody'd be super happy with it. It's really helped me out.
So it'd be a great crossover for the guys that are shooting the hit or the Calvin lead or whatever. It would feel more like a bolt gun trigger. That's what you're saying, right?
If you're used to a really good bolt gun trigger, this is the same feel. It's actually exactly the same feel. We proved it on the trigger graph. We have a computer that measures everything as far as weight over distance and everything, and it graphs identical to a bolt gun trigger.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to try one of those. Frick, here I go, spending more damn money on this freaking podcast. Anyway, no, I appreciate that in depth because it's hard for a lot of people to picture. And now, if you're listening, he kind of showed us. If you're listening on the podcast, he kind of showed us what it is. But if you go to timneytriggers.com, you can kind of see the inside and how it does look totally different. I've seen one in person and looked down inside of it and kind of scratched my head for a minute trying to figure out how everything was working. Because, I mean, all the rest of the AR triggers were based upon a standard design, with the way it released and the way the hammer hit and everything. But that's interesting. We're gonna have to look more into that. Jill, let's start off a little differently with some of the things that we've done here, but Timney has a little bit different history / what's the word I'm looking for? John treats the employees there a lot different than I've seen a lot of other places. I worked for Timney for a little while, and I kind of walked through there and shook my head like, wow, he does things differently. And I kind of think it would be awesome for everybody listening to kind of understand how Timney is different than a lot of other companies in the industry. Do you want to kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, my interview here was the most unique interview I've ever had. Sitting down with John Veer was, just completely different than it was anywhere else. But the neat thing about this company is that everything we do here, all of the employees that work here, we're one big team. And we work off of the ethic of responsibility to forward this company, not just our own department. So instead of just being accountable for our own stuff, we're taking responsibility for everything to make sure that Timney succeeds as well as we do individually. And the respect that we have for each other and the way that we do things is incredible.
Yeah, and then you've also got so do you have a unique name yet, like everybody else has, or you haven't got that yet?
No, I have a tendency to slap people when they call me names.
So she's got the name nobody, because you've got Heart Attack, you've got Freight Train, you've got T-Bone, you've got all these people that had names, but you don't want to tell anybody yours, huh?
I'm just so.
All right. Well, and that's one of the other things that kind of sets Timney apart was when everybody comes in, they kind of get their name. Now, Freight Train, that's Jeff Dodge. Everybody's like, he is a freaking freight train. I've seen him in when he starts going on stuff. And, you've got John and his dog that's always there, and his wife, down the hall talking to everybody. And it's just it's a crazy dynamic that happens at Timney, and it's kind of interesting. And I mean, we can talk about it all we can till we're blue in the face, but you'll never know it until you actually go to Timney. Do you guys offer tours?
Oh yeah, I give tours all the time, and people are amazed and impressed every time they come through. We have an entire exercise area for the last half hour of work. We have a personal trainer come in, and we get paid to exercise and be healthy. And it's not something I've ever seen at a company before. We have a dream coach. I mean, it's just our success is his success, and that's an amazing thing to have happen.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. It takes a lot, especially in this day and age, to get your employees really interested in your product and in the end result. And that's good to see you guys are. And Daniel, I know he's got a lot of invested in this where he's shooting with it. So that even probably takes it out more, because now he's developed it so he can shoot better, right, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you got anything, Jonathan, so far? Is he froze over there? It looks froze.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is like freaking out right now. I might have to go reset it real quick.
It's that freaking shit you've been looking at on there again, probably. It's freaking marine thing, I know.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so I want to go.
Website's pretty labor intensive on the system. So.
Yeah. So I want to go next into kind of some of the things that you guys have released lately and some of the things that you've taken away. Now, what I mean by that is the 510, and you guys have renamed it. Do you guys kind of want to talk about kind of the idea and the plan behind getting rid of the 510, why we got rid of it, and what changes were made to it's the Elite Hunter, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the 510 has been around forever, has been a great trigger forever. So we're getting a lot of, questions like, why would you get rid of something that works so well this whole time? But we didn't really get rid of it. We just redesigned it. So we redesigned the sear engagement and made it an internal sear engagement. It's just one less thing that the end user has to manipulate or try and set correctly to their needs. It's already done for them. We labeled the side of the housing for over travel and pull weight, so it's much easier to adjust. And we changed the sear spring pressure so that it's more compatible as far as all of the custom and clone 700 actions that are out there now, as opposed to your basic Remington 700s and the few custom actions that were around. Now there's so many different cocking pieces, different everything else. We've just basically reinvented the 510. And we did the same thing with the 520 CE, and that's how we made the hit.
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, I've had the hit now for, I think Jeff sent me one of the original like T&E ones, and I put it in one of my rifles, and the trigger's kind of hidden because most people can see, what color the trigger is, and it kind of lets people know what it is, whether it's red or green or whatever color. And I've had a lot of people start pulling on it, and they're like, wow, what is this? It's got to be something else, right? And I'm like, no, it's it's Timney hit. And it kind of freaked them out. But what a lot of people don't know is sear engagement. Can you explain kind of what sear engagement is and why the triggers were designed because of the sear engagement?
Certainly. So the sear engagement is the amount of engagement that's sitting on top of the trigger. So as far as what's going to hold, there's a shelf, right? So if you adjust it and take away too much sear, then the bolt's not going to stay cocked. It's going to drop. You're just going to have a messy situation. Well, when we had that adjustment on the back of the trigger, everyone said, awesome, there's a screw. We should adjust it. But it had already been preset. So it caused, confusion for some of our customers. And instead of having them get frustrated or having to redo everything and start from the beginning, we've just fixed it for them. They don't have to adjust anything with it. It's already done.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing, you got something, Jonathan?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. Another thing that's kind of, different is a lot of the custom actions have a little bit different interface between the sear and, the caulking piece. Everything's a little bit different in all of them. Most of them are the same. Now they say Remington 700 clone. A clone means that it's pretty much the same footprint, but some of the things are a little bit different on it. Now, what do you guys recommend for most of the competition style stuff out there? You used to set out a lot for, telling people, hey, you need to get the Calvin Elite. This is the one you want. Now, have you guys kind of changed the tune to that to go to the hit, or what is the thought process behind that?
Absolutely. The difference in the sear spring pressure with the hit than we had on the Calvin Elite has been night and day difference with that and custom actions. The variety of custom actions that we sent hit triggers to the manufacturers to have them run them through their actions, the feedback has been phenomenal.
And on that, it fixes some of the sear engagement. The hit helps with the deviation in those Remington 700 clones. So like you said, the clones are similar to a Remington 700, but they're maybe not exactly the same. And when you're dealing with 17 thousandths or 22 thousandths of sear engagement, if it's not real close to the Remington 700, that sear engagement either doubles or you have no sear engagement real quick. So the hit takes care of that problem. It's able to fit all those different variances, all those guns that are similar and close to a Remington 700, but they're not exact. So it allows you to have a much better trigger without having all the potentials for having failure.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest issues that a lot of shooters are having, and it's across the board with a lot of different triggers, is consistency. Between from trigger to trigger pull, where you hit the wall. Now when you hit the wall, it means your trigger's all the way to the back, but reset, different things like that. Where does the hit reset? Where does the wall? Where does all that stuff come in different than the rest of the triggers?
So you're asking how the trigger feels, basically?
Yeah. So I've heard a lot of people. Okay, let me put it this way. So I've had some people, say that this trigger is right there with another brand of trigger. I'm not going to say who. I'm not going to say anything, but they've said it's made leaps and bounds with consistency, with overall trigger pull. Because a lot of people, especially when you dry fire and you try to learn your trigger, where the break is, where the reset is, where all that stuff is, and they say this trigger, the hit, is more in line with a lot of other higher end triggers on consistency. Now, is that because of the spring? What makes that trigger that much more consistent than some of the other ones?
So it's that spring pressure and that sear engagement and so most people that are dry firing a lot and most people that are practicing that amount, they're shooting not a 700 action, they're shooting some kind of clone, right? And then the other side of it is they're not shooting a 3-pound trigger. So if you're shooting an 8-ounce trigger in competition, which I don't, what do you run in competition, John?
Typically about 8 to 10 ounces, depending on the gun. But
when you're in that 8-ounce trigger range, you can feel everything, right? So this hit trigger cleaned all that stuff up by improving by finding that midline of all the variants and all those actions and being the answer for everything. versus building a Remington 700 trigger for a Remington 700, right? So, and like I said, if you're at an 8-ounce trigger, you're probably in those, you're around 20 thousandths of steer engagement, which is very, very little. So if you're used to that and you get a clone and all of a sudden your steer engagement jumps up to 35 thousandths of engagement, it's going to feel super creepy because you've got, 50+% more engagement in that sear. That sear has to travel 50% further. So your trigger, has to travel further while you're pulling it. And you'll feel that. Whereas you're not going to feel that with a 3.5, 4 pound trigger. So that's the hit really fixed that for everybody.
I got you. There is another thing along this line. Now, I was an armor for Remington for a while. I worked on a lot of guns. It's amazing to me how many people smash the shit out of their trigger trying to put the trigger pins in. And it's all of a sudden I got a shitty trigger because I went to freaking work with a 10-pound sledge trying to put a little trigger pin in, right?
My buddy wrote that with a 2-pound hammer the other day. Watch him do it.
It's like line the freaking thing up and hit it. So when you guys are installing a trigger, what do you tell people? Like, what are the steps? Because a lot of people don't go through the steps in their head. They smash the cassette. Now the freaking sear doesn't work. Now the spring doesn't work. And all of a sudden it's Timney's fault that it doesn't happen. I've seen it. It's happened. What do you guys go through as far as recommending on installation?
So I work in tech support all day as well as do the other things that I do here. And so I get those calls a lot. And it can start off with, somebody's frustrated because the trigger's not fitting and it's not working. But honestly, when you do it in steps, like you're saying, it's a simple, easy install, and everybody's able to figure it out quickly. If I'm on the phone with someone and say, okay, let's start from the beginning, usually, as long as you follow those steps, it's a nice, easy process. But if I'm used to doing something that doesn't require directions, I'm probably not going to read the directions to put something else in. However, each company does things a little different, and some of our triggers have proprietary things that other triggers don't have. So it's important to follow the steps, and I think if those steps are followed, all of our triggers are pretty easy to work with.
Mm-hmm.
I would give anybody some advice. I would say use a vise, because I see a lot of, when I've seen triggers messed up, it's mostly because guys are just putting them on the table and going to town with a hammer and a punch. And if you put it in a vise, your life's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. And one thing I've done is I've actually rotated it so it's upside down, so the trigger's on the top and it holds the sear in with a bolt. Leave the bolt in, and then you can run a pin through a drift punch or whatever on the backside and kind of line everything up. But it just cracks me up. I had a lot of people bring their triggers in pissed off because they're like, it doesn't freaking work. I'm like, well, hell, no wonder it works. I'm surprised it even moves the way you've beat on the freaking thing. But
8-ounce trigger with a 2-pound hammer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what is wrong with this? And a lot of times it's just user error, but they always want to blame somebody, and it's always somebody else's fault. That's the funny thing that always cracks me up. So what is Timney? Is there anything new coming down the pipe that we can hear about, or
Absolutely.
What's the secrets?
So we have our 2-stage 1022 trigger. I believe we should see some shipping out tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. I'm not a 2-stage person for the most part, but this trigger is amazing, and I'm definitely going to be a 2-stage fan with this one.
That's a hard one, going from a single stage to a 2-stage, but there are a lot of 2 stages. Let's go down that for a minute for people that don't understand the single stage versus 2-stage. Can you explain to most people what that is? And in your opinion, is one better than the other? Because we all have our own opinions, but I'd like to hear your guys' opinion on it.
So you chose a 2-stage design.
Yeah. All right. So the difference between 2-stage and single stage, in my definition, is a 2-stage trigger is going to have some amount of perceivable movement and take up until you hit a solid wall. And then that's going to be where the sear movement takes place and allows the hammer to fall. So you've got that take up and then the break. Whereas a single stage trigger, you're just going to apply pressure to the trigger until it breaks. I personally use 2-stage triggers. I don't really like the single stage triggers much, especially for ARs. With the 2-stage AR trigger, no matter how amped up or how cold, wet, and hungry I get, I can still have some tactile. Hey, my finger's on the trigger. I've taken it up to the wall. Now I can just determine when to break that shot. Different people, it's different for everybody, right? Like, there's great shooters that use both. It's just my preference to use a 2-stage trigger.
I think part of that comes down to like what triggers you've used in the past too. So like I was a huge 1-stage fanboy until I got on a Tug 2000 when I hit the Marine Corps team, and it had, I can't remember which Anschutz trigger it had in it, but it had another Anschutz trigger and was like the cleanest 2-stage trigger I'd ever felt on a bolt gun, and I completely changed my tune. And if I could put that in every bolt gun I had, if I had unlimited resources, I would, because that trigger was phenomenal for a 2-stage bolt gun trigger. But before that, my experience with 2-stage triggers was crappy mil-spec AR triggers, the SAS trigger, which was equally as crappy as a mil-spec AR trigger, and so I hated them just because I'd never felt a good 2-stage.
Yeah, a good 2-stage makes a big difference, and a properly set up 2-stage. I've played with a lot of guys 2-stage triggers, and it'll be a 2-pound 2-stage trigger. The first stage is 1.5 pounds, or a little over 1.5 pounds, and you can't hardly even feel that second wall in there. My preference is half, basically right at half. If I've got a 2-pound 2-stage trigger, I want 1 pound on the first stage, 1 pound on the second stage. If I've got a 10-ounce 2-stage trigger, I want 5 ounces on the first stage, 5 ounces on the second stage, and that almost always is going to feel better than the lightest that you can go.
Now, is that something somebody can call in and ask about? Like, hey, I want a 2-stage trigger, but I want it set at this. Is that something you guys can do?
For like a Remington 700 trigger, something that is adjustable, we absolutely do special pull weights for retail customers.
Okay. So if I called in, and what is the so you don't have a hit 2-stage, right? You just got the Calvin Elite 2-stage.
We have a 2-stage trigger that is the low pull weight leg to hit, as far as like 8-ounce first stage, but it's not the hit. It's just our 532 that we've had.
Okay. And how low does it go from stage to stage?
So it would come set 8-ounce first stage, 1 pound second, unless you chose otherwise. We can do 8-ounce first stage, 8-ounce second stage, or all the way up to 2 pounds.
Okay. All right. Now, one thing that me and John were talking about before this, and Justin Heyer was talking about it in one of the groups the other day, is perceived, and I want to use that word, I guess, perceived pull weight, changing from a stock to a chassis. Now, Jonathan had this. I've had it a few times where I've changed from a stock to a chassis, and all of a sudden my trigger's like God's gift to mankind, because it just became so much better, because everything changed. And I was kind of explaining to him about the way your hands, and your triggers interact, or your fingers interact with the trigger. Now, whether you go like an MPA, BA enhanced vertical grip, or, you're on a Macmillan with a swept, it's amazing how much a lot of that can change. Now, and I was telling him about this one. This was one. Now, a lot of you that are going to be listening on the actual podcast aren't going to be able to see this, but what I've got is one of my Timney Calvin Elite adjustables. This was one of my favorites for shooting with the MPA enhanced vertical grip, because, and I don't have any, I got stuff everywhere, but I don't have one of them. These came with shoes. And I turned the shoe to adjust it to my finger. Now that changed I don't think it necessarily changed, and you guys can maybe help me decipher this, but I don't think it necessarily helped me change the trigger weight. It just helped me change perceived trigger weight. Is that something you guys have heard of?
Absolutely.
So can you explain to us, like, because I know in my opinion what it is, but do you guys have any technical data or anything behind this as to explain to viewers and listeners what the perceived versus changing it is? Do you have anything like that?
As far as technical data.
Mhm.
I can tell
don't
you
think so.
experience on it.
Right.
And that, I mean, it's just like anything else. The wider area you spread that force out on, the less force per square inch. So it's going to feel like it's less. So the wider the trigger shoe, generally the lighter the trigger is going to feel. And then also when you change your grip on a chassis or a stock, it changes the leverage that your finger has, right? So if I've got more leverage, a stronger lever on that trigger, it's going to feel lighter because I used to use less muscular force to pull it. So generally, the closer to your hand a trigger is on your trigger finger, the lighter that trigger is going to feel. The further out on the tip of your finger a trigger is, the heavier that trigger is going to feel.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. Jonathan, you had a question a while back about the amount of triggers that Timney makes. Now, when I worked at Timney, I was kind of overtaken about how many freaking SKUs there were. But can you guys, how many SKUs are there? Do you guys know off the top of your head?
Oh, shoot. I don't know off the top of my head, but there's probably 6.
Come on, customer service. I told John one day, I'm like, I've never even heard of that freaking gun, and you make a trigger for it. Do you guys make a lot of those? And he just laughed. He goes, yeah, we do. And it boggles my mind. And I think a lot of people will do good. And I know Chris, before I left, Chris was working a lot on the website and updates on, how many triggers there are, information. How is the website coming? Is there a lot more stuff on there? And is there stuff that people need to know about when they visit your guys' website?
Yeah, and we just kind of relaunched a new website. So we're still adding stuff to it. We're still working on it. We're still loving suggestions for it. We're trying to make it as user-friendly and easy as possible for our customers to navigate information. Our hope is that you can just go on the website and find what you're looking for without having to search for it. And I think it's come a long way since what we had, but we're still adding to it.
Yeah, and I think every good company does that. I don't think a website ever finishes. It's always adding and growing, so that's a good thing. Now, you guys offer a really good military law enforcement discount package, right? Now, can you access that on the website as well?
Absolutely. There's a law enforcement military link that will allow you to upload your credentials or information, and then it will automatically apply that discount to any online orders that you place.
Okay. And then also tell me, I saw something in an email or something a while back about the hashtags you guys are running. Can you tell us about that on social media?
It's a new program that we just started. There's 3 hashtags on there right now. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people who are out shooting our triggers, posting things with our triggers, to use these hashtags so that we can find them easily. If you're just using hashtag Timney USA or hashtag, anything Timney, it's a lot harder for us to keep track of who's doing what, who's actually out there and posting things. And we want to reward them for doing it. So we have the hashtag program and a rewards program so that people can earn tokens and rewards for doing things like that. And then that will earn them product.
Yeah, and that's a good way. I think I've tried. It's hard to remember to freaking do the right hashtags and everything on social when you're trying to do it. And it's been easier when I've just copied and pasted into my freaking description to try and get that. Now, you have shot a lot, on Marine Corps type stuff, Jonathan, and you just recently started shooting for Voodoo. Now, one of the things you were talking about was the hit. Do you want to kind of tell everybody about what you've gone through and what you found with the hit?
Yeah, so my bolt guns before, I've shot a bunch of different triggers. My personal precision gun before I went with Voodoo, I was just running a stock Ruger trigger that I had done some work on and had some issues, kind of like Daniel was talking about earlier, where the sear engagement wasn't quite right, and I'd done some adjustments and made it too light, and I had a match last season up at Peacemaker where I was having to rack the bolt, or not even rack the bolt, but try and cock the firing pin probably about 10 times to get a shot off just because it was disengaging the sear on its own and wasn't firing. And then went on with Team Voodoo, and my Voodoo showed up with a hit in it. And I haven't had any issues with the trigger. I've got it set almost as light as it'll go because I'm one of those weirdos. But I've loved it. And especially since getting it back in that JP chassis, like it feels completely different than it did in the stock I had before that. And I've had a really good experience with that trigger. I've shot a couple of matches with it now. I've got 3 more matches scheduled for June. And I'm really liking it, especially compared to the Calvin Elite I had in my old Remington 700 or some of the other triggers that I've had.
Gotcha. Yeah, and like I said, my hit's been. Are you going? Go ahead.
I was just going to say because I've been in the same boat as far as modifying my own triggers. Once I got out and started working with big companies, man, don't mess with your triggers. Don't mess with the engagements. You know, like I didn't have any idea how much testing and evaluating, and I mean, guys are trying to make these things as good as they can make them. You know, if there's 30 or 50 thousandths worth of sear engagement on that thing, that it's there for a reason. And they do a lot more testing than I ever possibly could do. And I was right there with John with the Dremel tool and an angle grinder, and trying to make it work, and broke my fair share of stuff too. So if anybody's listening, man, obviously do what you think is right, but like, Sig shoots a 55-gallon drum of brass a day testing. Timney, we do testing every single day on a massive scale. Like, you're just not going to be able to do that kind of testing to make sure that your trigger is truly safe and going to work for you in every situation. So go buy a hit and be done with it.
Well, it's not even Dremel tool stuff too, like just the adjustments, paying attention to the user manual. So one of the issues we used to run into on the team for high power was we were running Geisley Nashville matches because it had to meet that 4.5 pound threshold for match. And we would typically, or a couple of us, started experimenting with having a lot of the weight on the first stage and very little weight on the second stage. So that way we were able to kind of simulate shooting with a lighter trigger, especially in like the 200-yard offhand. And we were running into issues with the second stage kind of disappearing after 1,000 rounds. Like, I was in the middle of inter-service 2 years ago, and during an EIC match, and halfway through standing, like I did my dry fires, everything was golden. They start time, I get like 3 shots off, and then all of a sudden my second stage just vanishes. Yep. And I had to just deal with it because there wasn't enough time to get fixed and whatnot. And it was because we called Geisley about it, and it was because we weren't supposed to be setting the second stages so light. And they were never designed to be done like that. They'd never tested that because they didn't think anyone was dumb enough to do it. Insert Marine Corps rifle team, we were dumb enough to do it. It worked really well when it worked, but we never knew when we were going to lose that second stage, and we had to keep adjusting those triggers and keep having our armorers check the hex keys and whatnot because they kept walking out on us, even with Loctite.
Yeah, and it amazes me. Like, I've seen a lot of people Tikas, and other, different Savage Tika. I had a guy at the gun range the other day was screwing with his, and all of a sudden he ND'd right there in front of us. And I'm like, dude, why in the hell are you doing that? You're going to end up shooting somebody when you're screwing with it. And, it pisses a lot of people off when I say this, but there's a reason. There's a pretty big reason why Remington had to do the recall. And a lot of it was because people were doing just that. They hated the freaking shitty ass pull weight of the Remington 700 trigger, and they started screwing with it. What happens when you start screwing with it? Shit goes south, and you start shooting when you don't want to be shooting. It shoots when you put it on safety because you messed with it. Oh, let's back this freaking screw, clear the hell out, and see what happens. And this is not the way. That's not the answer. And that's one thing that I really kind of wanted to commend Timney about. On one thing is, you're never going to stop anybody from adjusting their trigger, but you can help them so they can understand which one to adjust. Now that comes back to the hit and you guys, putting the stuff on the side of it. Hey, this one you adjust for this one you adjust for this. And hopefully they'll at least get it through their head that they're not going to screw both of them completely out and go Western on something. So that's a good thing to have. Now you guys still, we've talked a lot about the hit. You still have the Elite Hunter, and you still have the Calvin Elite adjustable in those. What do you guys, and maybe you don't have necessarily a recommendation, but what do you guys have recommendations? You guys recommend the hit in competition rifles. What do you guys recommend the other triggers for? So if somebody's looking for a trigger for anything else they're shooting.
The Elite Hunter is perfect for hunting rifles. I mean, hence its name. The pull weight range is perfect, and it's just so compatible with all the different variations. So I really like that trigger and the pull weight range on it for the hunting application. And then our 2-stage triggers are obviously the same.
Now on the Elite Hunter, what is the poundage weight on that? And do they come in a wide shoe like the 510 did, or what configurations do they come in?
Yeah, the shoes are very similar to the original 510. So it's a 1.5 to 4 pound pull range. And you can get the 3/8 inch wide standard curved, or you can get a 1/4 inch thin, or you can get the 3/8 straight shoe as well.
Yeah, and I love those straight shoes on chassis. That's just my opinion. I just love the straight shoes on chassis. Are my favorite, because a lot of people will take their finger and run it all the way down to their trigger guard, which I don't necessarily understand. But they'll use that, run it down to the trigger guard, and then shoot. And the straight one just seems to perform a little bit better when you're doing that. But if you're used to the standard curved one, it's pretty good. Now, do you guys recommend the Calvin Elites to people for certain things, or would you rather just start pushing them to the hit?
The Calvin Elite, as far as the adjustable shoes?
Any of them, like the Calvin Elite adjustable or the standard Calvin Elite. Would you rather them maybe start going the hit route, or what? Yeah, because the adjustable was one of my favorites.
Yeah, the adjustable we still have, and that is our Calvin Elite. As far as the one that was our standard Calvin Elite that did not have the adjustable shoes, that was our 520 CE, and we have completely discontinued it and replaced it with the hit.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. And so the adjustable one, you can adjust the actual trigger guard forward and back, which actually helps a lot, as Daniel was talking about, with adjusting it to your trigger finger and pressures and stuff. But it also comes with the trigger shoes. It comes with what, 3 trigger shoes?
And a knurled rod, yeah.
Yeah, and that's just what I've got on here. I don't know. I've got them around here somewhere because I don't ever shoot it with the knurled rod. That's why I'd rather go with the hit. But is there anything else you guys kind of want to go over that we haven't talked about? Because I know there's always a lot of freaking questions out there about people and triggers, and I don't think half of them get answered, but I'm having one of them brain fart days where I can't think.
Man, the only thing I would say is if when it comes to upgrading stuff, to me, the number one thing to upgrade is the trigger. You know, it is the number one thing that's going to improve your shooting over absolutely anything. I will take a rifle with a good trigger that's less accurate over a more accurate rifle with a bad trigger, because I can shoot that inaccurate rifle as good as it can be shot. Whereas if I've got an accurate rifle that I don't know when it's going to go off, or the trigger pull's so heavy I can't hold it on target, it doesn't do anything for me anyway. So,
yeah. That's your last interface, right? Between the shooter and it going down range. I mean, of course, the shooters, whatever they do, whether they flinch or they can't read wind right or everything else, but it is the last thing that goes through is that trigger pull. And, you know, we said in a lot of meetings and talked about that before with how the heck do we get people to understand that the trigger is the most important thing? And just like Daniel said, it is. There's a lot of triggers that I've shot over the years. I'm like, and I go to, you know, something else and it's a better trigger, no creep, no over travel. It's just a great feeling trigger. And it's like, I don't know how the hell I shot these other triggers. You know, and one good thing that I might recommend is going to matches and getting behind other people's guns. Now, I usually take a few guns with me to matches, whether it be ARs and rifles, and I let people play with them. Now, that being said, Timney is coming to Dog Valley in, when the hell is it? Next weekend? Not this weekend, but the next.
Just a few days.
Yep. Is it you and Heart Attack coming up?
Correct.
You're bringing the trailer.
Yep.
You're not bringing John, though.
No.
What the hell? How do we get him to a match? That's what I want to know. John, if you're listening, get your ass to a match because we want to see you out there. That and Ellis. I haven't seen Ellis at one either, though. Ellis is sneaky. He hunts a lot of freaking turkeys. Let's talk about that real quick. A lot of people don't understand and realize that you guys make a shotgun trigger for the 870.
We absolutely do. It is by far one of my favorite things that we make.
Do you shoot a lot of shotgun?
I love shooting shotguns, and just a sear and spring change in an 870. It's a completely different gun. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they sent me one last year, and I put it in my 870, and I was like, holy crap! I didn't realize there was a way to do it, and that system is actually extremely easy to install, and there's a pretty good guide in the manual that comes with it to how to install it. And it only took me, what does it take somebody? Maybe 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, it depends on the person, but yeah, shouldn't.
What do they cost? Do you remember?
$100 and change.
$100 for a trigger. I don't know. It's the funny thing. Everybody bitches about price nowadays, but how much did you spend on the gun? How much did you spend on the optic?
Yeah.
The trigger is like one of the cheapest things you can do to your freaking rifle to make it, better. And people are whining like, "Oh, I'm going to take a Dremel and fix my own trigger." No, that ain't how it works. But
people don't like buying triggers and barrels, and I'm like, dude, by the time you shot that barrel out, you shot $2,000 worth of ammo through it. Put a $200 barrel on the thing.
Yeah.
Put a $200 trigger in it. Like, yeah.
It's how people are, though. It cracks me up. People are so cheap when it comes to that.
It's not even just people, though. Like, sometimes it's gun companies. Like, we were trying to test this rifle that got dropped off to us when I was still on the team, and we couldn't even test it because it was a 3 Win mag, a 700 action, and it had, we guess, because we have no idea, had like a 10 to 12 pound trigger on it. Like, we kept thinking it was on safe and couldn't get it to shoot well, but you had to squeeze your entire freaking fist to get the thing to go off. We eventually just gave up trying to test it, and we were trying to test their barrel system. And they were a gun company, and they didn't want to invest in like a halfway decent trigger so that we could actually test their rifle properly. And again, they probably had $600 to $1,000 in their barrel and the rest of the build, and they had a crap trigger in it that was heavy as shit. We couldn't do anything with it, so we gave it back to them with no feedback.
It amazes me how many companies, and a lot of them don't stay around for very long because of that exact freaking reason. They won't invest in themselves. But that kind of brings me to a point Jill kind of brought up that I totally forgot about because I'm in one of those states tonight. But your guys' OEM program. Now, there's a lot of there's a freaking shitload of new gun builders out there. There's everybody's a gunsmith now. Anybody that's got a lathe in their garage is a gunsmith and everything else. But you guys have a great OEM setup. How do you guys run that, and how do people learn more about it?
So we offer 40% below MSRP to our OEM partners on orders of 10 or more triggers. They come without packaging, and they can be preset. Anything that's adjustable, we can preset for you so that it's ready to just drop in and go.
Okay.
We offer marketing, networking, co-branding. We've got OEMs that have their name on one side of the housing, our name on the other. We try to have a good relationship and a close relationship with all of our partners and make sure that they're getting every single thing that they pay for.
Yeah, that's good, because there's a lot of people out there. Honestly, there probably aren't. I can only think of here I go thinking again. It hurts my head. There's probably 5 or 6 companies out there. They're decent trigger makers. Am I pretty close to say that? How many are there?
I mean, there's a lot of companies making triggers nowadays. So
yeah. That's the thing, though, is maybe I'm stuck in a bubble somewhere, but I guess I don't know about a lot of them. Probably am. I'm stuck in a damn bubble. But anyway, I appreciate you guys coming on. I hope that somebody listening's learned something by us talking. And if they have more questions or they want to reach you guys, how do they do that?
You can give us a call, 623-223-1111. I'm in tech support, like I said, all day. So if you have any questions, you need any help with anything, I'm happy to do it.
Is it just you, or is it a heart attack too?
Heart attack is in test, so it's usually me and tech support. Sometimes we'll rotate the boys in here too.
I got you. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Jill. Thanks, John. Appreciate you guys taking the time. Hopefully you're listening. If you have any other questions, you know how to reach them now. I look forward to shooting more hits. Look forward to seeing you guys in a couple weeks here at Dog Valley, and hope you have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for letting us come on.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you.